Sometimes you just got to wait for the news, and eventually it'll come. And you might be waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and wondering and saying, boy, it seems like time is running out. And boy, I'm not really sure how we're going to, if this is ever actually going to come to fruition. And you start to doubt that something you expect to happen actually does happen. And then finally, it does. And it finally did late last week for Pitt basketball as Australian power forward Roman Siulepa finally was made official as joining the Pitt basketball program, something that had been talked about for months, every week. I mean, it was an ongoing thread on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. Every week on the live show, we had questions about it, and all we knew is that it still seemed like he was headed for Pitt, but we had no updates on when or how or where or why that would happen. Well, we now have the when. And it happened Thursday night. The news got reported by ESPN, and then on Friday morning, Pitt made it official with a press release that Roman Siulepa is going to Pitt. And it kind of came out too late for us to really work it into Friday's Morning Pitt. So we thought, well, that's a great way to start off the new week, right? Dive into it with news about Pitt adding what looks like a pretty good prospect to this 2025-26 roster. Does it complete the roster? I don't know. It seems like a possibility they could still add another piece. But for now, it's certainly it's a big piece to add. But what does it do for Pitt's roster? What does it mean for Pitt's roster in this coming season to add Roman Siulepa? What does he bring to the roster? How are the Panthers going to be different by having him, by virtue of having him? Or is this more of the same of what we've seen Jeff Capel add so far this offseason? What does all of it tell us about what this team is going to look like this year and how this team is going to play this year? And perhaps most importantly, whether this team can win this year. And I have some answers to some of those questions. Some of those questions I'm still asking myself, like, will this team win this year? That's anybody's guess, right? But we can definitely look at what they've added up to and including Roman Siulepa and draw some conclusions about what Jeff Capel wanted, what Capel and his staff were looking for this offseason, and how they wanted to build the roster. And I think by a certain definition, if you define the result, in terms or in the context of what they were trying to do, I would say they were successful. They had a successful offseason. Question is, did they have the right plan? Let's talk about all of it. Let's talk about Roman Siulepa, what he brings to Pitt basketball, what Pitt basketball is going to look like this coming season, just kind of what this offseason has meant for the Panthers here on the Monday edition of the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, it's Monday here on the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com, hanging out with you this morning, getting your week started, your day started at the very least, and I guess your week as well, with a little bit of Pitt sports talk after the big news that came out late last week of Roman Siulepa joining the Pitt basketball program. We are going to talk a lot about that today, but of course, what we always ask you to do is like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. It's the most comprehensive source. Wait, did I say like and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther? Okay, good. Sometimes I get mixed up if I'm talking about the YouTube channel or I'm talking about the website. I really just need to pay attention and focus, and then I won't have these issues. But youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, it's where we have all of our Pitt video content, these daily morning Pitt videos, Monday through Friday. Every day of the week, we do a little bit of Pitt sports talk to get your day started. We have a live show that we do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Me and Jim Hammock get together and talk with you. You get in the comments, the chat over there, the comment screen, and post your comments and questions, and we have a little interaction, a little back and forth. We do that for post-game shows as well after the football games. We have press conferences, interviews, all kinds of video content right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You want to make sure you don't miss any of it. Like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And then, of course, the website below, Panther-Lair.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Pitt football, basketball, recruiting, transfers, all those things you could be looking for. It's all right there. Panther-Lair.com, the Pitt site on the 24/7 Sports Network, where you get all the Pitt coverage, and you can hang out with hundreds and thousands of other Pitt fans all day, every day. Pitt fans are hanging out, having a good time, talking about Pitt sports. Panther-Lair.com. All right, Roman Siulepa. Who is he? He's from Australia. He's the FIBA site lists him at 6'5". Let me see what Pitt's official press release said, because we've been talking about him being 6'7". Why wouldn't Pitt's press release? Pitt's press release calls him 6'7", 220-pound forward. Seems to project as like a power forward. That's largely the position he's been playing with the different, the FIBA teams, the under 19 World Cup teams, and all this kind of stuff. And he was pretty dominant at that level, averaged 19 and 8 at the FIBA under 19 World Cup this summer. Probably part of what delayed his, official announcement as far as getting to Pitt. The key with Roman Siulepa is he is a big athlete. There's been ongoing jokes on the message boards kind of over the last few weeks, last few months, as people have been talking about him a lot. After watching him a little bit in some of the live streams of some of these games, there have been ongoing jokes that, like, if he played football, or if he was playing in this country, somebody would have converted him to defensive end by now. He'd be a 6'7", 240-pound defensive end going into college, not a 6'7", 220-pound forward prospect, or 6'5", 6'6", whatever he is. He would be playing football. He'd be playing the offensive line. He'd be playing offensive tackle or defensive end, and he'd probably be pretty good at it. I remember way back in the day, Pitt's football coaches saying, man, if we could get DeJuan Blair to play defensive end, he would be a monster. And it's that kind of guy. Now, I'm not comparing Roman Siulepa to DeJuan Blair in any way other than he probably could be a pretty dominant football player, North American football player. But he is a big, bruising forward. And he's a big athlete. Plus athleticism, particularly for his size. Really athletic guy, gets above the rim. He's aggressive around the rim. He can attack the rim and block shots and rebound and play tough defense. He's very physical. And he's a big, rugged forward, the kind that I don't think Pitt has really had under Jeff Capel, a big, rugged forward like this. Now, they were sort of projected to have a big, rugged forward when they were going to have Cam Corn playing the 4 this coming season, which might still be the case. We'll talk about that in a second. But they haven't really had a player like Siulepa. I mean, it's been a while since you've had, I think, the kind of physicality that he's going to bring to the court. Somebody joked to me the other day, he only knows one way to play, and it's that aggressive physical nature. Now, that might lead to some foul situations. He might run into some foul trouble as he navigates, NCAA basketball for the first time. But that's his style. And I don't think it's the worst thing. I think he's going to bring toughness on defense. He's going to be bring toughness on the glass. And his offensive game will largely be around the rim. There's not a lot of sort of touch or shooting ability or skill in that way. Not necessarily a great handle. I mean, all the scouting reports you read say he's got to sort of develop that handle and develop that, that part of his game. But you get him the ball close to the rim, and he's probably going to throw it down and maybe take a foul in the process. But he'll finish through contact, I think, as well as anybody on this roster, and probably as well as anybody as we've seen in a little while at Pitt. That's the style that he brings. That's what he brings, and I think it's a high level. I mean, there's a high ceiling for Roman Siulepa. I don't think he's going to reach his ceiling as a freshman in college. I don't know what his next step will be after this, if it'll be a sophomore year of college, it'll be a sophomore year at Pitt, a sophomore year at another school, or an attempt at the NBA, whatever it might be. His game will continue to develop. I mean, I think the natural skills, the basic physical skills that are there, with the size, with the athleticism, with just the physicality and sort of just rough and tough nature of his of his game and his approach to basketball, that's a great place to start. And then, as you add some of the, finer skills and more refined skills and developed skills, then I think he can really blossom as a player. I don't know how much of that's going to happen this year, though. I don't know if you're really going to see his handle develop all that much this year, or his jump shot develop all that much this year, even like mid-range jumper. I don't think you're really going to see that come out. What you're going to see is a bully on the court. And I say that in the most complimentary way possible. And I don't think he's going to be one of these guys that has been pushing people around at other levels, and he comes into, NCAA college basketball and, it's not so easy to push guys around. I think he's going to continue pushing guys around. Like I said, I think he's going to have foul issues from time to time. That is just going to sort of be, it's going to be part of the package that he's going to run into those problems. what's interesting is how he fits in with the rest of this team and how he fits in with the other offseason additions they've made. Because by and large, he fits pretty well with what they've built. What they've built this year, what Pitt has built this offseason is a team that looks right now like it'll be, by comparison to last season, bigger, stronger, better defending, and better rebounding. And just generally tougher. And Roman Siulepa fits in with that 100%. You look at the guys that they brought in. Deshaun Jackson is a big, banging center. Even like DeMarco Minor, the point guard they brought in from Oregon State, is a tough, physical point guard. They brought in physicality. And they brought in a couple guys who might be able to shoot with Barry Dunning Jr. and Noyes Indricitis. We'll talk about them in a second. But you add in, Siulepa to go along with the additions of Jackson and Minor, along with bringing back Cam Corrin and getting Papa Amadou Conti back out of the portal, and you've got a bunch of big bangers. Guys who are just going to make life difficult on whoever they're guarding. And that seems to have been the design. That seems to have been the plan. The lasting lesson from last season seems to be, and I hope we'll get a chance to talk to Jeff Capel about this sometime in the near future to ask him, but the lesson from last season, or the lasting impression from last season, seems to be that they didn't defend well enough, which is true. They didn't rebound well enough, which is true. They weren't physical or tough enough, which I guess is probably true, but I sort of believe if you can score, that's less of an issue. And so they wanted to go out and correct those things. They wanted to go out and change those things and improve in those areas. And with the additions they've made, I would say they've done that. What's the question that remains, and it's the question that has lingered throughout the offseason with every addition they've made, with every transfer they've landed, with every recruit they've gone after, the question remains of where's the scoring going to come from? Because they haven't really added any elite scorers or shooters. Barry Dunning Jr. is the best scorer coming in, after he finally found his way to South Alabama and found some success there. But even there, even with Barry Dunning Jr., who, transferred a handful of times, was at Arkansas, then UAB, then finally landed at South Alabama, on his career, he's a 30% three-point shooter. And we've talked about this before of where's the shooting going to come from, because there just isn't a lot. I think the Pitt coaches, to some extent, are hanging their hat on Barry Dunning Jr. doing what he did over the final, how many games was it? About the final 16 games of last season, when he was a 43% shooter from three, where he averaged about almost 2 made threes per game. And really over the last 20-some games, he was a 40% three-point shooter. So he really kind of finished on a hot streak. He shot 31% for the season. But again, the final 16 out of 32 games, the second half of the season, he improved considerably and shot 43%. Now, is that who he is? Is he a 43% three-point shooter or 40% three-point shooter? Or is he the guy he's been throughout his career, which is a 30% three-point shooter? Pitt is probably hoping that he's going to be closer to the 40 or 43%, even if it only translates to 35, 37%. That's what they need, is a 35, 37, 38% three-point shooter. Great. Yeah, if you could get a 40% three-point shooter, that'd be great. But even if they could just get somebody like Barry Dunning Jr. into the 35 to 38% range, I think they would take that. And I think they're hoping for it and maybe even counting on it. And same thing with Noyes Indricitis, who I think there is a history of being a good three-point shooter, but in his 1 year at Iowa State last year, he only attempted 14. So he was 2 of 14, but I can't read too much into that because it was a small sample size. But if we eliminate that because it's a small sample size, then there's no sample at all. There's no evidence of him shooting good or bad. So you have no idea what you're getting there. Brandon Cummings looked like a good shooter last year. Maybe he could be a guy who hovers in that 35 to 38% range. But somebody's going to have to make shots. At some point, you can't make all your baskets in the paint. You're going to need guys to shoot from a little bit further out than 5 feet. And the additions they've made, the types of players they brought in, whether it's Roman Siulepa or Deshaun Jackson or DeMarco Minor, who's not a shooter, or Cam Corrin, bringing him back and seemingly looking to get him more time on the court, either at the 4 or the 5. Like, this team is being built to bully. This team is being built to fight. This team is being built to push other teams around. And I think it's completely plausible that they might be able to do that. But I just don't know if it's going to matter when you're giving up 3-pointers at the other end, or the other team is capable of shooting threes and you're down there settling for twos all the time because you just don't have that shooter. Now, maybe you can be physical enough to defend, but I tend to think you can have physical defenders on the perimeter, but I'm not really sure. I think DeMarco Minor can provide that, but I don't know about the other guys. So even if you say, well, they're going to bully him down low and then get physical on the perimeter, you only have one guy really who looks like he's going to be physical on the perimeter like that. So I don't think you're going to be able to run teams off of the 3-point line. I think they're still going to be able to shoot. I think there's still going to be holes in the defense. They could be better defending the 3 than they were last year and still give up a decent amount of shots. In which case, you're giving up 3s up there and you're settling for 2s down there because you just don't have the horses to shoot. And so that's still a concern with this team. And as much as Roman Siulepa is intriguing, as much as Roman Siulepa is promising and looks like he has a really high ceiling, still doesn't address that biggest need. And that biggest need is not going to be, I don't think it can be addressed. I think there's one more rabbit in the hat potentially, and we'll see if they pull that one out, and maybe that can help a little bit, but I just don't. It just doesn't seem that like that's going to be who they are this year. They're going to be a team that gets physical and tries to push you around. And they'll probably have some success with it. Will they have enough success to get to the NCAA tournament? Will they have enough success to be competitive in the ACC? I don't know. You don't see a lot of teams playing like this or winning like this. So if that was the plan, to build a team that looks like this, that has these traits we're talking about, then Jeff Capel and his staff were successful. Will that translate to wins? We'll find out. But either way, that saga has come to a close. At least the saga of waiting for Roman Siulepa has come to a close. Now the saga of seeing him on the court will begin. So we'll see what that brings. Hopefully, like I said, we'll get a chance to talk to Jeff Capel soon about all of this. I think we all have a lot of questions. I certainly do. And hopefully we can have one of those little sessions like we had last year, which I think were really fun and entertaining and informative, even if some of those things didn't necessarily carry over to the season. But either way, it's all right. Like this video, subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com so you don't miss any of our Pitt video content. And then, of course, check out the website, Panther-Lair.com. Thanks so much for tuning in today. I hope you had a great weekend. Hope you have a great Monday. Your week gets off to a great start. We'll catch up with you tomorrow for the Tuesday edition of the Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.